Hello, and welcome to Autism After 18, a podcast presented by Spectrum Connections, an instruction services resource for autistic adults. I'm Tristan Radke.
I'm Melva Radke.
And I'm Louise Getz. When autistic individuals graduate from high school, their support services stop, but they don't stop being autistic. They still need ongoing help with learning the social and emotional skills they need to get a college degree or to get and keep a job. Mentoring can help autistic adults learn those skills in the best way possible by being paired with an individual who spends time with them, gets to know them, and participates in community activities with them. They learn by doing with support from someone they trust.
Our guest today is AJ Hokland. AJ works with the Autism Mentoring Program, or AMP, which is a first-of-its-kind mentoring program for autistic high school students in Minnesota. The program is showing some positive results for autistic high school students. So AJ, lots of questions to ask here, but let's start with this. Can you share a little bit about your background? How did AMP start, and how did you become part of the project?
Well, I discovered or recognized that I was autistic when my eldest went through an evaluation and was diagnosed when I was about 40. And subsequently, we realized that pretty much every branch of our family tree has autistic people on it.
Yeah.
So it's been a learning experience ever since. You know, prior to that time, I had worked in special education, degrees in child development and developmental psych, and just didn't really know a lot about myself. I think is really common for autistic adults that weren't diagnosed as children. As far as AMP's beginnings, my now friend Emily has a pair of twins that are autistic, and she realized when one of them came to her that there really weren't autistic adults working with kids. He said, "Mom, nobody understands me through shared experience." So she had this idea to start this program. I met her through our mutual friend, Venus DeMars, who is a local rock legend. Emily had done a documentary film on Venus, and I've been working with the band since about 2006. We met at one of Venus's house parties, and we started talking, and she said, "Well, I'm doing this thing, and it would be great to have an autistic adult come and be a part of our committee." So I started going. There were 2 other autistic adults on the committee with us. That was what I really appreciated about the project is that it wasn't doing something for autistic people. It was autistic people working together to build something that works for us.
Interesting.
Yeah. Although we ended up starting our pilot with high school students, as a side benefit, I ended up working with the children of 2 of our team members, both doing childcare, just hanging out, playing board games, going to the park and that kind of thing. And with another one, I went to summer camp with him for a week and was there working with the whole class, but I was kind of point person for him. Not only did I get to be a part of the committee, I also got to help hang out with these kids whose parents wanted this for their kids.
Neat. So you're on the AMP steering committee. What's your role on the committee?
I think my main role is to drop any masking that I might have learned over the years and be myself.
Nice.
As we're going through the meetings, I would offer feedback and challenges to the group. I'm also genderqueer, so a lot of my feedback had to do with language that's inclusive. If the conversation was moving too fast, because the people in the committee, in large part, are folks who want to get things done. At least one of the other autistic people that was on the committee didn't really have time to process and respond in real time. And so I realized that and asked for, some space holders.
Interesting.
And then as we went through and were developing questions, using like non-open-ended questions on evaluations, shifting it more towards what would make sense to me to be able to answer on a regular basis.
So you served as kind of a bridge.
Yeah, pretty much. I worked a lot to kind of make it work for the autistic people on the team.
Cool.
The program's unique because, unlike a lot of other programs, the mentors are autistic. So autistic adults mentor autistic youth. So do you think that's been a good model for mentoring?
I think it's a great model. There's a lot to be said about the value of lived experience rather than book learning.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not autistic, even if you're surrounded by autistic people, I have friends Actually, I don't have very many neurotypical friends, but but there's just so much more translation that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Having autistic mentors for the autistic youth is almost a shortcut.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So AJ, who are the program's mentors and mentees, and how are they selected for the program?
The mentees come from one high school program in the cities, Bloomington, because that's the school where we've started the pilot. We had to start small. We haven't grown beyond that school yet. Those students are all identified as autistic in their school programs and have filled out with their parents an application and been interviewed and selected to participate in the program. Similarly, most of the mentors come from MICC. They are referred by teachers and staff there, either from the college area or the community area. And we have several mentors who have come from outside of MICC, partly through my own recruiting, the Twin Cities Queer Exchange.
MICC, could you share with us what that is?
They changed their name, and I can't remember what the acronym is right now.
Yeah, it is MICC, I believe. It's Minnesota Independent College and Community.
Minnesota Independence College and Community.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. There's an application and there's an interview process. So that's pretty much how the selection happens. People who are able to commit to the weekly time frame. This past year, we've been doing virtual remote meetings, and it's gone really well. Sometimes it's even better for some of the people involved than meeting in person has been.
I was wondering about that, if COVID had changed up how you did
It definitely changed things up. I think it's with mixed results. Some people preferred meeting in person, but I know I was able to participate more easily because I could participate from home instead of driving a half an hour each way to the site.
Yeah.
And so for me, that worked better.
Yeah. So how many high school students have been mentees in the program?
The first year, I think we had 6 for the pilot year. I think the second year was sort of an extended pilot, and then we've had the COVID year. So we haven't had a lot of mentees. I think we may have had up to a dozen. Some of them have participated for the full 3 years and really enjoy it. So I'd say under 20 right now, still small, but it's working.
Program like this, you have to have a smaller scale because it's so individualized, really.
It is.
This podcast is brought to you by Spectrum Connections, a nonprofit organization providing skill instruction and mentoring support to young autistic adults. I understand that you're a mentor in the program. Maybe you could describe what your role is as a mentor.
Sure. I don't work with the high school kids specifically. My role has been more as a mentor to the mentors. So we scheduled 5 sessions this past year. I'm an elder. I have kids the age of most of the mentors.
Yeah, right.
Most of our sessions this year focused on advocacy, identity, and activism, and just sharing our experiences, trying to offer them some of my own experiences so that they could have a way to avoid some of the stumbling blocks that I had in my way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also been really valuable to have an elder queer for some of the young ones that are also, they don't identify as cisgender or straight. And in the autistic community at large, there's a really high overlap between transgender, non-binary, all of that mixture and being autistic.
Read about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a correlation, but
there's a lot of overlap. So I think that's been important for me to be there as a role model, as a support person, somebody that they can ask questions and say, hey, what was it like when? Mm-hmm. And I learn a lot from them too.
Yeah, right. It's a good point. I think the learning goes both ways, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
AJ, I'm curious about, maybe you could share with us some of those gems that you share with your mentors that they might not have picked up on because of your lived experience.
One of them is about the masking. When I grew up, I was expected to behave a certain way. My meltdowns and all of those things that I had were just dismissed in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Thought of as bad behavior.
Well, no, not even that. It was just, but you're such a good kid, so we're just not even gonna, I was the straight A student. I was put into gifted programs, but I was also selectively mute for most of fourth grade.
Okay.
Because nobody knew what to do with me.
Right.
I think the younger generation has had more acknowledgement that they have something going on.
Mhm.
Although some of our mentors weren't diagnosed as youngsters, they were more in their 20s.
Right. Right.
But we know differently now. We
Yeah.
know new things. We talk a lot about encouraging or pushing language that we prefer. I'd say it goes beyond encouragement to pushing. Most of us that I've talked to, of course, everyone has their own feelings about it and opinions about it, but I prefer to say that I'm autistic. Sharing information with the mentors, like not all of them knew that Hans Asperger was a Nazi,
Mhm.
a eugenicist. So I'm sharing that kind of information with them so that they can make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Talking about dealing with parents who are my age, who may not be understanding or.
Yeah, you definitely have a variety of perspectives.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really valuable for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Having kind of the trifecta of being autistic, parenting autistic people, and having been a teacher of autistic people.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I kind of got it from a bunch of.
Talked about perspective taking. Yeah. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that you mentioned masking, because that's something we want to touch on in a future podcast, because I know it's complicated for autistic people.
It is. It's like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but sometimes it's just so much work and I just don't care.
Right.
And I'm just gonna
Yeah.
be myself and kind of let it all hang out.
Yeah, it can be hard to be on stage all the time.
Yeah. And there's a lot of translating that goes into it. Sometimes I just want other people to do. I would just like neurotypical people to say, oh, right, I need to say what I mean instead of hinting at this, expecting people to read between the lines like most people do.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a thing that, in Minnesota,
Yeah.
Yes.
it's a strong cultural thing to say, hey, well, you should know
Right.
what I
Yeah.
mean when I
Right.
say
Right.
this thing or that thing.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's another sort of interesting point, is cultural differences in communication.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I talked to a young man years ago who travels the country. He's autistic and he participates in autism groups. And he's talked about when you go to the South, there's certain expectations about how you greet someone.
Right.
They have their own sort of hidden curriculum.
Mhm.
It's very regional. So
It is.
you're on the steering committee. What do you think comes next for the program?
Well, what I'd like to see is for us to be able to sort of package what we've learned and be able to put together sort of a transportable, shareable, here's how you set up your own program.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think it needs to be a lot of small programs. I don't think one big program that has a lot of little pieces is going to work.
Yeah.
Because each community, like you said, is so different. Cultures change around the regions, but there are autistic people everywhere. So I kind of see our role as teaching society to meet and accept us where we are.
Right.
So much of special education and social services is about working with disabled people to help them meet the community where the community is at, and not the other way around.
Right.
And I'm going to be part of turning it around.
That's a very important point. Touched on it earlier. It's reciprocal learning.
Yeah.
It also, it's not community awareness, it's community understanding.
And community work, not just letting us be there. It's making it a comfortable place for us to be.
Right.
I know I'm invited a lot of places, but I don't go most of the time because I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, I tend to think of it as a difference between inclusion and belonging.
Yes.
Yeah, inclusion, you're in the same room,
Right.
but belonging, you are an integral part of that community.
Mm-hmm. If I go back to Venus de Mars, who introduced Emily and I took the role as selling merchandise at the shows.
Okay.
In order to go and enjoy the show, I had that table between me and the crowd. I had a purpose while I was there. I loved going, but just going and being on the dance floor was too much. So if I had that buffer of the table and the sales of the CDs and posters and pins and things, that gave me a reason to be there. And that made it comfortable for me to be there. So that's how I approach being out in big, busy, active social situations.
Nice. I have another question. Do you think, AJ, that the program helped prepare students for life after high school?
I think the program is helping all of us just get through life.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mentors and the steering committee members and even the university researchers, I think we are all learning so much from this that is helping all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the main focus was on helping the high school students, and I believe they've certainly been helped, some of the things that have happened is some of the kids' grades got better in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because they felt like they had an understanding person who was there for them every week.
Yeah.
That was a side benefit that we weren't looking for. I think that the community that we're building is something that can travel with us for a long time.
I so hope that we can look forward to reading books or publications on your program so it can be duplicated.
I hope so too. I know the university researchers are doing their part on that. And Emily and Jenny, who are kind of our lead team leaders, have been writing. But I think that we're going to try to figure out how we can put it all together in something that's transportable so that other teams don't have to spend, 2 or 3 years getting ready for a pilot.
Right. And there are the layers to this issue because, well, it's so important to get good matches, I think, between mentors and mentees, and that can be complicated. I imagine there are issues related to insurance and liability. I mean, when you get into it, there's a lot of pieces to this.
I'm not, and those are questions that Jenny or Emily would have the answers to.
Right. But just in terms of writing about a model, it would be, there would be a lot of pieces in that puzzle.
There are, and I think we covered them all in those first few years of meeting every week or every other week. We put in a lot of time.
I wanted to thank you so much, AJ, for sharing your time with us.
Yeah.
Been great learning about AMP and how it's helping autistic high school students develop their relationship skills. How can people learn more about the program?
It's autismmentorshipprogram.org, autismmentorshipprogram.org.
Okay.
There's a .com out there that's not us.
You're .org.
.org.
Okay.
Well, thank you again, AJ.
Sure. You're welcome.
Yeah, very helpful.
Okay. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Take care. Have a wonderful summer.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. This podcast is brought to you by Spectrum Connections, providing skill instruction and mentoring services to autistic adults. You can learn about our services by checking our website at spectrum-connections.org.